Hello all and welcome to another 1 versus 2. Even though it's Christmas, I'm not going to be delving into a couple of Christmas films. Instead, I'm going back to the Legend of Zelda. Last time it was Ocarina of Time versus Majora's Mask. Well, this time it's Twilight Princess versus Skyward Sword. Just like last time, I'll be comparing the two games in several different areas to see which one's the better game. There will be a few spoilers along the way, but let's dive into the first subject. Plot. In Twilight Princess, Link hails from Ordon, a village in southern Hyrule. He gets caught up trying to stop Zant from merging the Twilight Realm, a place where criminals are sent, with Hyrule and then taking over. When you enter an area that started to be merged with the Twilight Realm, Link turns into a wolf, and when I heard that they were doing that, I was quite dubious about how it would work or whether it would just ruin the game completely. But it ends up working really well, and because of the Twilight Realm, it affects some of the characters in such a way that it allows for some really freaky moments, and the game generally becomes really dark. In Skyward Sword, many years before the events of the game, there's a war between the goddess and the forces of evil. In order to protect the people, she sends a landmass into the sky and uses clouds to cover the ground. The landmass that was sent into the sky becomes the village of Skyloft, and this is where Link hails from. In most Zelda games, Zelda is the princess of the land, but in this, she's Link's childhood friend. She has an accident and falls below the clouds and seemingly gets eaten by a big giant dark monster, and Link ends up having to go and find her. Thing is, there seems to be much more emphasis on trying to find Zelda than battling the hordes of evil. In Twilight Princess, because of the Twilight Realm, it gives a much darker atmosphere, and it really gives a big sense that if Link fails, Hyrule is well and truly screwed. Whereas Skyward Sword, really all you're having to do is to find Zelda, so it just becomes a glorified game of hide and seek. So because of that, Twilight Princess gets the point. The guide. Since the Ocarina of Time, Link has had a guide to help him along the way. In Twilight Princess, that role goes to Midna. She was the ruler of the Twilight Realm until Zant came along and overthrew her and turned her into an imp. She decided to help Link because if Link can defeat Zant, she can return to her normal form and reclaim her reign over the Twilight Realm. In Skyward Sword, the role goes to Fi. She's the spiritual embodiment of Link's sword, created by the goddess with the sole purpose of helping Link against the forces of evil. What mainly separates these two characters is that Midna has something personal to gain from it. Fi does a good enough job at helping Link out, but she does it very robotically. She also, most of the time, just ends up stating the bleeding obvious. Midna has got so much more personality that she comes up with a few sarcastic comments and she is great. Really, this one's quite easy. As nice and as great as Fi was and as good enough a job as she did, Midna has just got so much more personality that Twilight Princess has to have the point. Characters. Every Zelda game has loads of support characters that you can talk to along the way. Some help advance the plot, some give you side quests, and others are just there to talk to if you feel like it. But what mainly separates the characters in these games is that in Twilight Princess, the characters seem to have much more to do with the main plot than they do in Skyward Sword. You can get through most of Skyward Sword without having to talk to most of the support characters. Really, they are there to supply these side quests, and there are plenty of them to do. The thing is, with Skyward Sword, there are some really decent characters. Tailo, one of the children of Ordon Village, is really good. He's quite adventurous and brave, but he also gets into a bit of trouble because of it. Telma, the owner of the bar in Hyrule Town Market, is also a good character, and she has some funny moments. In Skyward Sword, there are some good characters as well. The Goron that pops up every now and again is one of my favourites. The Kikris are quite a nice introduction, as are the Weird Mole people, but none of them can compare to Groose. The guy's a legend. I absolutely love him. At the start of the game, he is your typical high school bully, but as the game progresses, he changes quite a bit and he becomes an absolutely brilliant character. So, out of the two games, although in Skyward Sword the characters are more to do with side quests, they are great. Skyward Sword gets the point. Combat. Even though Twilight Princess doesn't have the one-to-one swordplay that Skyward Sword has, it still has a really good combat system. Running through hordes of enemies, hacking up everything that comes into your path is really good fun, and learning the hidden techniques adds that extra element to the combat. The one-to-one in Skyward Sword was really good. There were a few problems with it not slashing in the direction that I wanted to, and that sometimes caused either fights to drag on longer than they needed to, or me losing just because Link wasn't slashing in the way that I was telling him to. Overall, though, the point for this one has to go to Skyward Sword. The only thing that Twilight Princess has over Skyward Sword is that you can run along whilst slashing, but that's not enough really to put it above Skyward Sword. The one-to-one, despite its problems, was brilliant. Point to Skyward Sword. Link's loyal steed. Roaming around Hyrule just wouldn't be the same without Epona. She was great in the Ocarina of Time, just as good in Majora's Mask, and is fantastic in Twilight Princess. Thanks to the introduction of horseback swordplay, she plays a much bigger role in the game than just taking you from A to B. In Skyward Sword, everyone has a Loftwing. This is a giant bird that the people use to fly around the skies with, and the bond between the bird and the rider is very important. So in that sense, they pretty much just ripped off James Cameron's Avatar. But even so, the sense of freedom that you get when flying around the skies is great. And it is good fun searching around all the little islands and exploring the place. The controls, though, are quite different. For Epona, it's the good old control stick on the nunchuck, and it's nice and straightforward and simple. With the Loftwing, you control it by twisting the nunchuck left and right and up and down. It can get a little bit complicated, and the Loftwing can end up going in the direction you don't want it to, just because you're struggling to try and get it to point in the right way. But even without the controls, though, the Loftwing is pretty much just there to take you from A to B, whereas Epona has a much bigger part, so the point has to go to Twilight Princess. Music. When I played Twilight Princess, I thought the music for it was orchestrated, but then I found out that it was all computer generated. Having now played Skyward Sword, which has got orchestrated music, there is a big difference between the two. Even so, the music for Twilight Princess is really good. I love the tune for the Hidden Village, and the music in Hyrule Field is really good as well. I will always love the Serenade of Water, not because it was in Ocarina of Time, but because it was just so damn good. The music for Skyward Sword is also really good. There are some great tunes, but sometimes they don't always match what's going on. You can be in this big battle to the death against some evil lord, and yet there's some really nice tune going on in the background, and it just doesn't quite fit. Yes, it's orchestrated and it is really good, but the overall tunes aren't quite as good as they are in Twilight Princess. The music for Fi's singing when you learn some songs is good, but really the first one that she learns is the best one. The Howling Stones in Twilight Princess, all of them are really good. Though they are copies from previous songs from other Zelda games, the way they've done them, they sound really good and are really catchy tunes. So, yes, Twilight Princess is computer generated rather than orchestrated, but it has the much better tunes, so it gets the point. Final battle and ending. This one's difficult. Twilight Princess ends with an epic 4-stage battle against Ganondorf, and it is possibly the best fight against Ganondorf out of any Zelda game. Skyward Sword starts with 2 stages against Girahim and then 2 stages against his master Demise. Out of the 2 games, the fight against Demise is probably the hardest of the lot, but that is probably due to the problems with the swordplay that I explained earlier. Both final battles are really epic and they are both great fun, so it is really difficult to choose between them which is the better one. Ending wise, again, both games have very good endings. Both have funny moments, both have their sad moments, and they both have their emotional moments. It is really difficult to decide. What would probably be the deciding factor though is that as good as they both are, Skyward Sword probably does have more funny moments, more emotional moments, and all that lot than Twilight Princess has. So it is extremely close for these, but I'm going to have to give the point to Skyward Sword. With the scores the way it is, there is nothing Skyward Sword could do that would put it above Twilight Princess. With the atmosphere that Twilight Princess can make, it really does give you the sense that it is you versus the forces of evil rather than you're just looking for someone. Though Skyward Sword does have its moments of absolute genius, it's just not quite as good as Twilight Princess. If Twilight Princess was a 10, Skyward Sword would be a 9.5. They would certainly be my numbers 1 and 2 for my top 5 Zelda games of all time, but overall, Twilight Princess just gives the better overall game. I love it.